This is part two to the Bob Long Insight Failure to Fire 280 FPS DMAIC. This presentation, this video assumes that you watched the last video in the last 5 minutes or so. So if there are some concepts or some things that don't make sense, please revert back to that video. So the agenda for this particular video for part two is to revisit the analyze phase, move into the improve phase, the control phase, and then wrap up with a potential for the part three of this DMAIC process. We're going to be looking at this particular CAD drawing that was made by this individual at this link, BrazEU. Uh, Special credit to him for making this SolidWorks, CAD, whatever drawing a decade ago, and it's still being online for us to review. So, looking at our analyzed root causes, we have taken a look at dwell being insufficient and reviewed manuals of other markers. And looking at 10.5 dwell, 12 dwell, and 16 dwell, we have, by testing and turning that problem on and off, we have at least confirmed that as a contributing root cause for the Bob Long Insight not firing at 280 feet per second. The reason why I'm leaving this at contributing right now is I have to assume over the last decade that if Bob Long and his engineer and Blast in general, if they could have fixed this problem with only a dwell change on the board, I have to assume that they would have done that. And they would not have come out with the reflex engine and the onslaught and eventually the force totally replumbing that bolt system. Taking a look at the 6 vent holes reduce forward energy too much. We don't have any objective evidence for that. We don't have any verification yet, and we can't confirm it as a root cause. We don't know. We haven't tested it. But for the lubrication, going back to that particular video, we found that after 1,000 shots, there was some degradation, but not as much as you would want to call that as a smoking gun. And also looking at it, we need this gun to work more often. Like we can't be lubricating more often than 1,400 shots. That's 10 pods, right? You're playing a hard X ball point. You can do 10 pods on one point. I've never done that, but people have done that. So we need to look at the system and find a solution that doesn't revolve on drowning this thing in lubricant. So objective evidence for vent holes, right? So we've seen this animation before. The big takeaway here is this volume right here is vented back here, right? So if this is at 185 psi, that volume is divided by 2 and transferred over here, and that is an efficiency trick of the platform because of it being a 3-way solenoid. When it switches to here, that is not full 185 pressure from the regulator. That is just make this volume go here. So you got to imagine that it goes over here and it's peak pressure right here, and then think of it like a pressure graph. It goes as it goes forward. And if there are vent holes here, then it would spike high and then like, and pardon the sound effects, but it essentially vents out, goes onto your face, goes onto your hand in that lower vent hole that sits right here. And there is no more energy that air is imparting on the bolt once it gets to about here or so, maybe a little bit farther in the animation. Apologize for that animation not continuing. So these vent holes, what are we talking about, right? Well, this is the general drawing here, right? So you see the tines, you see the bolt, you see the pillow, here's the feed neck and where the barrel screws into the solenoid flow path holes. And then if you look right here, there's these 3 holes on either side, 6 total, that I'm moving over to this drawing, that at a resting position, this bolt tail totally seals off, right? But then when the engine fires forward, and now you can really see them here, there are 6 holes that vent to atmosphere to little channels in the body of the marker. And once the bolt passes this stage right here, there's no the energy, instead of being pushing the bolt forward, is pushing the bolt forward and venting. So when this chamber empties, there's no more energy being imparted. And the same source for all of this. This is just another picture that shows you a real life picture. 1, 2, 3, and then on the opposite side, 4, 5, 6. So needed materials if you want to try tapping this yourself, right? And special credit to Impt for now. I did not come up with the idea of tapping these holes in a vacuum. He has suggested it in the past. I'm just the first person to come along and test it and try it and figure out a way to do it. So the materials you're going to need are a number 55 drill bit, a 0-80 tap, a T-handle tap wrench, a 0-80 1/16 inch set screws that come in packs of 50, and they're tiny, they're really small, and 0.028 Allen wrenches. And the reason why this size and this size was picked is went on McMaster-Carr, and 0-80 and 2/8 Allen wrench size, that was essentially the smallest that you could drive a set screw with. That was, if you went any smaller, the set screws didn't have the the place for the Allen wrench, so they needed to be retrievable was my requirement. And then there will be no steps for Loctite in this demonstration, but you're going to want to fixate them somehow once you decide what you're going to use or not use. So step one, fixate your bolt in a vise. Make sure your holes are top dead center, just easier to line things up. Um, I did this with a hand drill. If you have buddies or friends that have lathes or mills or whatever, a true machine shop, I highly recommend utilizing that. But this is kind of dirty science, and we just needed to see if it made a difference. Um, so you start drilling. You do not want to go very far at all. You want to essentially go the length of the 1/16th set screw, and that's it. And that's 0.06-ish of an inch. So do not go deep, because the bore of the stroke is down here, and you do not want to interfere with that. And then once you have gone as far as you think you need to go, you're going to place your tap, and I got 3 notes here, right? This did not take much pressure at all. This is very easy. If you are using your arm to turn this, you are putting way too much force, and you're cross threading, or you're doing something wrong. So only 2 fingers of pressure. Keep the tap straight, top dead center, 12 o'clock, and you need to rotate that tap down until you reach the end of what you drilled, and then you need to lefty-loosey turn it back out. You can't just pull it out, otherwise you'll just rip all the threads that you just made. And once you've done those 3 steps, you'll have a 0-80 tapped hole for your set screw to be screwed into, which is ignore this. This is for a different demonstration picture that I did for Impt for Now when I was talking to him. But once your hole is tapped, you're going to screw that set screw in, and this needs to be flush, all right, because this gets pushed into your marker, and this needs to not be protruding. Otherwise, you'll make a real nasty grinding sound, and it's not fun. So when you're doing this, and this is also for the testing that I'm going to call out later in graphs for this video. All right, there's a specific order that I did these, and there's a specific order if you are going to do this yourself that you should do or not should do. Right, so for testing, when I say 1 tap, that is this hole here. I went left to right, from bottom to top, and I went bottom to top because the master vent hole is down here in the handle. So the logic is if we tap this hole, the remaining air has to go through this hole and down, and it has a longer distance to flow before it gets out, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then this one over here 6, right? That is the order of the testing performed in this video. Now, some of you may have already noticed there is a weight reducing hole right here. And on an initial set of testing, tapping number 3 right here was not effective because it was tapping to this hole, not to the bore hole. So the bolt would move forward, and at holes number 3 and 4, the air would come out and it would just go into this space here, and it really had no effect. So I had to go a little deeper and tap into here to actually block off holes 3 and 4, which leads to the recommended order for tapping for future use is 1, 2, 3, 4, and you should not be trying to tap this hole or this hole unless you really know what you're doing. So for verifying our improve, right, to verify the fact that set screws make a difference for forward bolt energy, there's going to be two test flows. There's going to be the synthetic test flow, that is turning the dwell way down. You'd never play with it like this because your gun would go down, but it's to make the biggest difference, to show that the screw is making a difference and that it is effective or ineffective. And then there's the field use scenario where we just want the gun to work. We want it to work at 300 FPS and be as consistent as possible at a dwell high enough that it's never going to go down. So we're going to talk about the synthetic one first, and then we're going to talk about the field use one second. So for the synthetic testing, right, we put the dwell at 10.5, and which was the barely working with the engine in the stock configuration. And the problem is currently on, right? Our plus or minus, we have shots as low as 170 and shots as high as 255. The gun is barely working. It's lobbing paint onto my garage floor, and um, you can probably say this scenario is similar to a compromised O-ring, or your lubricant is totally gummed up. The gun's not working, or it's barely working. So putting in one tap into location number 1, we made it to where the lowest reading was 250, the highest one was about 275. That is a statistically significant difference. The gun is a lot more consistent. The problem essentially is fixed after one tap, right? But one thing that and you always want to be able to do is you want to light switch the problem. So I then took the tap back out, and when it comes to paintballs and the temperature of my garage, there's some variables that I can't really control, and I didn't do a full 30 testing here because I didn't do a full 30 shot testing here. But tap out, bad performance. Tap in, good performance. Tap back out, this is still statistically significant bad performance reduction. It's just with 30 shots, it didn't go as far down as this one, namely this data point right here. So again, important engineering concept. ABA or light switching need to be able to turn the problem off and turn the problem on. So the other part of synthetic testing is your fix or your change reproducible or replicatable to other systems and other units? All right, am I just working on Insight SKU 1000, 521 or whatever that number was, or can it be ported to another engine from another marker, right? So I bought some parts recently, and this black engine right here has some problems with it. There's some broken tines, and I didn't optimize the O-rings, and there's just, as found, it's got problems. And trying to run it with 12 dwells as it came in the mail, my average was 168.5 FPS with some shots well into the 130s, and it was not working well. Now, once I put in one tap to its RAM housing, I still wouldn't classify it as being fixed because, like I said, there's some fundamental problems with this engine, but we definitely did see a statistically significant improvement to that engine, and it's possible with more taps or more fixes that this black engine could be converted from non-operational to, at least a play around fun engine and not just a paperweight. So uh, going back to the prior slide, we have been able to light switch the issue. Going to this slide, we have been able to replicate and reproduce the fix on a separate engine, a separate system. This is field use testing at 300 FPS, evaluating 0 taps to 6 taps, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 at 12 dwell. 12 dwell was the old guidance, so that's the dwell that was selected for testing. But you can see here at 12 dwell with this particular batch of paint, we were averaging 283 FPS, but with, I would classify 4 missed shots where if you were posting up on a mid bunker looking at the corner, these would probably miss. You would go too low. And this is, while not as bad as before, still showing that at 0 taps, the inside is performing at a marginal level. At 1 tap, we get the full average increase of a little over 10 feet per second. And uh, the spread is still a little high, but this is definitely the softest on paint setting that I would go with. I'm looking at between 1 tap or 3 tap, with 3 taps being the most consistent and 1 tap being the um, most gentle on paint but still working. 3 taps again is the most consistent, and then if you see, there's really only about a 1 or 2 FPS increase between 1 tap and 3 tap, and then once we get beyond 3 taps, it steadily increases by about 2 or 3 FPS for each one, with 6 taps having the highest impact. And we can assume that's because with fluid pressure flows, this is where we're really kind of sealing off the chamber and it's not venting much at all until the solenoid pulls it back out the other way. This change, 283 to 294, that is statistically significant, and 294 to 303, that is also statistically significant. So looking at our analyze phase again, we already talked about dwell. It is a contributing root cause, but it is not the root cause, because if it was, they would have fixed it. And we kind of saw that in the prior slide where uh, 12 dwell was still making bad shots even though we had the pressure cranked up to shoot 300 FPS. 6 vent holes reduce forward energy too much. We reviewed the drawings, reviewed the animation, and that is confirmed based off of our synthetic testing. We light switched it, turned the problem off, turned the problem on, and our field use scenario also found that 6 vent holes are reducing energy too much to be confirmed. And then, as we said earlier, insufficient infrequent lubrications eliminated, and um, yeah, moving forward. So going to our improved slide, for the root cause of 6 vent holes reduce forward energy too much, we're going to tap and Loctite 1 or 3 vent holes. That's going to be up to the user or up to the desired use case for the marker, and there may be future testing on that. The risks for that is the mod to the RAM housing is irreversible. You're literally drilling into it. That's a $40 part that you can currently source from Blast Legacy to replace. And the other big risk there is the set screws may migrate and get into the bore, so that is why you want to fixate them so that they never move. And reiterating, that is a confirmed root cause. For the dwell being insufficient, um, I don't see a whole lot of risk here. I think the corrective action is to set stock boards to 16 and to set Sci-Fi boards to 16 with an ABS of 4. That's just kind of mirroring what Field 1 has done on the Force engine. And I think in the future, Sci-Fi boards might be a little more popular for insights. And the risk here is loss of an efficiency, but a lot of folks have 77 cubic inch tanks now, and it's just not that big of a risk to lose efficiency for turning up your dwell. So the control plan, going to For the tap and Loctite 1 or 3 vent holes, the monitoring for that is going to be we're going to inspect the set screw position during maintenance and prior to play once a week or once every 2 weeks, depending on when you're going out. Every time you break down the engine to look for lubricant and O-rings, just is the set screw still there? Is it still flush? Is it too far down? Just take a look. If those set screws, if you see them migrating or moving, go from blue Loctite to red Loctite, and if they still move after red Loctite, perhaps evaluate soldering them in. This will be weekly for 3 months with escalating if the screw is migrated, and if it goes 3 months without moving, it'll probably never move. There really isn't a control plan for turning up the dwell. That's just good guidance, good sense, and if you go onto the field and because your dwell turned up, your FPS is a little higher, turn down your HBR a little bit and go play. So that is the end of part two. I really appreciate your time. Once again, a special thanks to Impt for Now coming up with the tapping of holes idea. If there's more interest in this particular project, there might be a part three. I have no idea what that testing would be. Thanks. Bye.